Welcome to the Western Bell podcast series, with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of this series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only, and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled, O Earth, When Will We Hear You Sing? Thomas Merton and Journal Writing as Prayer. The talk was given by Regina Sara Ryan on June 7th, 2025 via Zoom. Regina was the editor of Hohm Press for 35 years. She is a workshop leader, retreat guide, and the author of The Woman Awake, Igniting the Inner Life, Praying Dangerously, Only God, and other books. In this talk, she speaks about the Catholic mystic Thomas Merton and the way that he used journaling as a portal to prayer. She marvels at the honesty of his writing about his inner process, his praise and embrace of life as the play of God, his contact with so many notable figures about social issues during the Vietnam War, despite living a monastic life, and his interactions and interfaith dialogue with teachers and practitioners of Eastern spiritual traditions. Regina notes that he tasted non-duality and that his books impacted vast numbers of Christians. She facilitates journaling exercises with prompts such as to write and share about what I know and don't know about prayer. If you would like to engage the writing exercises, pause the podcast when a prompt is given and resume listening when done writing. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. Regina Sara Ryan.
This talk is about Thomas Merton, his journal writing, and journal writing as a portal to prayer. I'm going to be attending an international Thomas Merton conference in Denver in a week and a half, and I'll be presenting some of this material there. So you're kind of my trial run. So we're going to start right off with some writing. So please have a pencil, paper, or your laptop, whatever you write with, because this is about writing. But we're going to do something a little different that you may not have done much before as far as writing is concerned. Perhaps you've heard of the term Lectio Divina. Lectio Divina, of course, is Latin, means Lectio, reading, Divina, divine reading. And it's a long, centuries-old tradition of instigation for prayer that's used within the Christian Catholic monastic tradition and in many other traditions as well. So one would have a book that was inspiring. One would be reading it slowly, especially the scriptures. That would be the first thing you'd be reading. Studying the scripture, you'd be reading lines. You'd stop and close the book, and you would just sit with the inspiration that Lectio was giving you. But since I've been doing this work and recognizing a lot of Thomas Merton's work and how he used his journals, what I discovered was that Lectio Divina is not just about reading a book text. It's about reading creation. It's about reading nature. It's about reading what Merton called the calligraphy of nature, the sky, the patterns of clouds, the way in which a sunset happens, the morning dawn. It's really looking for revelatory, prayer-inspiring inspiration to take things from sunsets and aesthetic works of art and catastrophes of life and pieces of prose and prophecy and any miraculous, perplexing, quote, words of God that are endlessly presenting themselves to us in all kinds of storied form. So I'm going to invite us to do a form of Lectio that's a little bit different. Merton says, writing is a way in which we pray, as is sitting with a work of art, as is looking at a sunset. But he's very clear about putting his prayer on paper. And that was something that was really alive for me when I was working on the book Praying Dangerously. I did a whole section on writing our prayers because it was such a way in to articulating the energies of the spirits of our hearts. So I'm going to put up a couple of quotes, and I'm going to ask you, like you did in school where you had to write 100 times, "I will not throw spitballs at my neighbor." I'm going to ask you to write something 3 times. But as you're writing it, I'd like you to connect your pen or your laptop with your heart or your spirit and let the words become some kind of a communication to you that perhaps has some relevance to prayer. So let me put up this screen share. So here's the quote. The quote to write 3 times. "The mirror of the sky reflects my soul." It's an anonymous lyric from the Bowls of Bengal. "The mirror of the sky reflects my soul." Just write that one line 3 times and be with it as you write it. And here's the second part of our assignment. This is a quote from Thomas Merton. And I won't ask you to write the whole thing 3 times, but I'll suggest just a small piece of this. So here's what Merton says. "It is a strange awakening to find the sky inside you and beneath you and above you and all around you, so that your spirit is one with the sky and all is positive night." So you might just take this line. It is a strange awakening to find the sky inside you. Or if another piece of that quote occurs to you more, write that piece. Write it 3 times as Lectio Divina. Welcome back again, everybody. Anybody want to say anything about what that experience was for them?
Well, the act of physically writing down was an act of embodying the message, at least the way that I would connect to it. It's almost like, well, okay, I can think about the lyric or the prayer as a way of understanding it by reading it, but it doesn't really fully sink in unless I actually embody it. And the act of writing it gets me closer to that act of embodying it, and that grounded it in my being rather than just simply reading the text. So I appreciated the groundingness of it.
I noticed as I wrote the first one that while I was writing it, there was this kind of softness in my body, my heart and belly area. I felt affection. I just noticed there were these other sensations that occurred. So it wasn't just up here, even though I think of writing as a very mental process.
For me, the sky, I get lost in it. And it occurred to me that the night sky is a more familiar place for me and my soul. Somebody said that the soul is held in the night sky and the stars for us as a safe haven. And that when we go through our hardships, there's always a safe haven up there for the soul. So that was something that I've worked with a little. And so it was nice to not work with the daytime sky, but the nighttime sky. And the writing definitely was a doorway for more of that.
Before I was getting on the group, I was focused on getting the dinner done and the food put away and all that. So I was focused narrowly. And as I was writing this about the sky and the soul and the spirit, I could just feel myself opening, my consciousness opening. I mean, when I think of the sky, it's vast. It's just vastness. And also recently, when I've been meditating, I focus on the heart area, and it feels vast in the center of my chest. That's how I'm experiencing it. And so it just was reminding me of all of that as I was writing these words.
I focused on the words mirror and reflecting. So it led me with a visual sense. A mirror, reflecting, light. Somehow it's reflecting light and the sense of spaciousness when I look at the sky. So I led with a visual and went into a very kinesthetic, proprioceptive sense of spaciousness. That spaciousness is there.
Well, I think we've got enough of a sense that there's something to this. Well, at least there is for me. And I clearly saw how Merton used his writing as prayer and used it as an entryway into his love for God and his clarity of thinking and so on. So the point has been made. Portal to prayer. We've checked off that box. So the next question is, who is this guy, Thomas Merton? Is there anybody who's totally unfamiliar with Merton? If you're on any kind of a spiritual path, it would be hard to miss him in our day and age, because not only was he radical and revolutionary in turning around vast numbers of people within a Catholic Christian doctrinal domain into something really mystical and deep and personal for this age. In past ages, we had Meister Eckhart, we had great mystics, but in our day, in our times, he was born in 1915 and he died in 1968. I remember the day he died. I know where I was when I heard the news. He was a man of our time. He lived through Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the Second World War. His brother was killed in the Second World War. He was present for the beginnings of the Vietnam conflict all the way through. He had vast relationships with all kinds of movers and shakers throughout the world. Here he lived in this monastic enclosure in Gethsemane, Kentucky. Louisville is probably the biggest city close by. And he was there for over 25 years until he left to go to Asia, where he died from a tragic accident. It was an electrocution from a fan that he touched. And he was only 53 years old. And he wrote dozens of books and articles and his correspondence and his literary essays and his poetry and his journals. He's probably the most prolific journal writer of our times. Volumes and volumes. There are 7 published volumes of his journals that start in the 1930s and go right up until his Asian journal when he went to Bangkok and India. You can read his books. Many people started off reading his autobiography, 7-Story Mountain, in which he tells the story of his conversion to Catholicism. He was a very worldly man. His father was an artist. He was a writer. He's a painter. He's a photographer. He's a poet. He's like Renaissance man. And he's a womanizer. He has a child out of wedlock. It's kind of a funny way to say things anymore. But he has a child. So he's really a man of the world. But also, this was a time in which, very similar to our own times, where you look around and you say, it's pretty bad out there. Where am I going to find the truest path? And how am I going to actually make the biggest difference? And Merton decided. He was at Columbia University. He was teaching. D.T. Suzuki was one of his friends and mentors. And he was really deeply questioning what to do with life and made the decision that he felt he was really being called by God. It wasn't so much a personal decision. It was a fulfillment of a destiny. He felt called. And he stayed within organized Catholicism and Christianity for his whole life, even though towards the end of his life, he met some amazing Tibetan masters who, if he had lived longer, he may have been in co-relationship with them because they just blew him out of the water. It's one thing to work under some religious superior in a Catholic monastery. It's another thing to be an enlightened Tibetan master and not know what's up and what's down, you know. But he chose to stay. He also had a love affair with a woman who was a nurse when he was in the hospital and carried on almost 2 years. He loved her tremendously. She loved him tremendously. And he said it opened him in ways he could never have been open to what love is if this had not been part of his life. And yet in the end, they decided that it was essentially his choice to stay on and continue the work that he was doing. He was already world famous. He was already being read by everybody. So his relationships included people like the Dalai Lama. When Thomas Merton went to Asia, he brought a few books with him, one of which was The Message of the Tibetans by Arnaud de Jardin. He knew Thich Nhat Hanh. He knew Martin Luther King. He entertained Joan Baez at the monastery in the afternoon because he was very interested in the whole peace movement. She wanted him to leave the monastery and lead the peace movement. That was how powerful his message was to people of the times, that they wanted him to spearhead the anti-war movement. And so his writings go from the most profound mystical writings to writings about the war and conscientious objection and the insanity of war. And one of his books is called Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander, in which he grapples with how does a monk in a cloistered monastery stand by in the midst of the Vietnam catastrophe. He counseled Daniel Berrigan, the priest who was burning the draft records, and all kinds of writers. Boris Pasternak, he had a personal relationship, correspondence with. It's almost hard to find people he didn't know at the time as he was working. He was writing massive amounts. He was corresponding. He was available at certain points at the monastery for people to come and visit him. Sometimes his abbot in charge would let him have visitors. And at the very end of his life, the last couple of years, he became very dissatisfied with staying at his place in Kentucky because of the fact that he'd become so popular. People would sneak onto the property. He was living in a hermitage on the property at that time, not in the main monastery. People would be sneaking up to find his hermitage and peeking in the windows and knocking on the door. Here's a man who wanted solitude, and he knew he needed to get away. So in the last couple trips before he went to Asia, he visited several places looking for a really secluded monastic setting. One of the places he went to up the Chalma River in New Mexico, the Christ in the Desert Monastery, which is way out, 13 miles on nothing but dirt roads, way out in the desert. And he loved it there. The other place he went to is at the Monastery of the Redwoods, south of Eureka, California. And it's a place I would just love to be. And that coast really spoke to him, that northern coast. He really wanted to create a hermitage and lived out his life there. So we have this really amazing person. I don't know if I can get some pictures of him. Let me see if I can do that. There he is. I have to tell you that he wrote a lot of books, but there are so many books out about Thomas Merton now. It's unbelievable because people are taking his work and they're putting together anthologies. I just got this really thick book called Merton and Hinduism, which is all his writings about Hinduism. I got a book called Merton and Hesychasm, which is all of his writings on the prayer of the heart and Sufism. It's unbelievable what he was actually able to do. So you can go online and you can just look him up and see some lovely pictures of the man and how simple and beautiful he was. my interest was in his journaling. I've read many of his books, and some of you have probably read some of his books too. But as a writer and as a lifelong journaler, and as somebody who coaches people in writing, and we do a lot of journaling in our workshops and so on, and I find that a lot of us are very dissatisfied that we're not really getting from our journaling what might be possible. And so when I decided to do this program for the Merton Conference, I decided to just really focus on the journal writing and see what we could find out that was unique to his work, if it is unique. And then perhaps motivate ourselves to want to do a little more in the journaling.
So how many journals of his are published, or is there just one volume that's a collection?
There's 7 volumes published, each one like 500 pages. And then there's the Asian Journal, which is the 8th one. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's all his journals. Some of them have been a little bit condensed, but we're talking about starting in the 1930s.
Wow.
And we're talking about so regular. There are occasions where there's days between entries. There's occasions where there's even a week between entries. But I'm talking about, how did this guy do all his other work? Because his journal writing was so amazing. And he wasn't working a computer,
And he wasn't just saying, here's what I had for breakfast.
He wasn't just saying, here's what I had for breakfast. But the beauty of his writing is that he says almost anything and everything. It's that degree of honesty. As a writer, to come to the place of radical self-honesty where you can express what's really happening for you, you have to be courageous and unafraid to be able to say, oh my God, Brother Sebastian is driving me up a wall, with his sniffling every day at Mass. I can't stand it one more second. And then immediately, or not necessarily immediately, he'll go on and he'll start to say, oh dear God, God of small things, God that wants to grate on my skin like nails on a blackboard, help me to move through this and to take this as a part of my purification. And so that'll happen. And the next thing you know, he'll be, and this is what I loved so much about his journaling, and this is what's really helped me over the past year or so that I've been studying it. He'll end the sentence, and then he'll leave a little space, and then he'll say, 2 mourning doves alighting on the branch outside my window. The sound, fragrance, the breeze wafts through. And immediately he takes you into nature. That lovely line of his about the calligraphy of nature. He was reading the sky. He was reading the birds. He was reading the flowers. He was reading the smell of the breeze. And I have to tell you, it's constant. It's actually started a little bit less, and the older he got and the longer he wrote, the more his nature writing increased. The more he kept interspersing the present moment with what was happening in the business of life. And then he'd say something like, oh my God, they put on a television set in the chapter room the other night so we could all get a sense of what's going on. And there was actually a dance of toilet paper rolls. And he starts talking about the culture and the sickness. And then the next thing he knows, he's hearing a plane cross over the monastery. And he says it's a sack plane that's carrying bombs on the way to where they're going to be delivered to take them to Vietnam. And then he's often talking about that. And then the next thing you know, he's telling you that so-and-so has come to visit, like Joan Baez, and how she was running across the fields, leaping and dancing, and then singing him a song. And he created a way for her to sing for the other monks. It just didn't stop. It wasn't perfect. He wasn't trying. I haven't seen much in the way of his personal handwriting, but I don't think he edited very much of the journals at all. I know he did edit some, because there's occasionally a place in the printed journals where it says 2 or 3 pages have been torn out of the journal at this point. So he had some discernment. He knew at that point in his life, he knew he was going to be, well, he was already being so widely read. The correspondence that was coming into him was massive. But he never lost the humility and the desire to be a man of the people, to be one with the people that he was with. So he was going from the sublime to the ridiculous. He was going from rants and raves to absolute praise of God. He was going from prose to poetry. A lot of what he did was he would comment on books he was currently reading. I've done that. I find it to be a really interesting way to juice my journal. You know, you sit down, you go, what am I going to write about? When I was a kid, I kept a 5-year diary. You know, it's like 3 lines for each day of each year. Almost every day I used to say, my book is good. Whatever book I was reading, because I couldn't figure out what else to put in those 3 little lines in my 5-year diary. But now, as I'm reading, I will do what Merton does. I'll just riff off of, whoa, so-and-so Niall Williams just spoke about this, and whoa, did that just blow me away, and the way he's able to do this, and he's bringing up a question, and then. So I'm talking to myself, but I'm also talking to my highest self. I'm talking to my deep self. I'm talking in the way that you were writing to yourself as you were writing, the mirror of the sky reflects my soul. And a lot of our journal writing becomes nan, but a lot of our journal writing has the possibility of being a portal to clarification and then ultimately to prayer.
So you're saying how he went from the sublime to the ridiculous and he incorporated everything. But did you ever get the impression that he was embracing it all as the play of God?
Always. Yeah, that was the overriding context of his work. He went into depression. He went into doubt. He went into fear. He went into anger. And yet he wrote. He wrote through it all. And the overriding context is, this is where you've placed me. This is what creation is. There is no all light. There is no all dark. I mean, he's constantly writing as a way to contextualize it. But he wasn't holding himself back from saying, 3 days of dragging my butt with no joy. Where's the joy? And I think it was the doubt and the confusion, lots of confusion at times, because he had to walk a really sharp razor's edge in that monastery. His writings were constantly being taken by the censors in the church and cut out. And he could have just said, well, forget you guys, I'm out of here. But he didn't. He stayed the course. I think that's one of the things that's so amazing about him. He stayed the course. And by staying the course with his own integrity, he accomplished amazingly great work. So now, what I'm finding within Catholicism is that we have a few really wonderful spiritual mentors within Catholicism today. But because I come out of a guru tradition and I've been introduced to several living masters, I've had such an advantage in having met enlightened beings. And I'm not sure that many Catholics have had that experience of meeting non-dual beings, those who are beyond the beyond. So what people are finding in Merton is a mentor, a spiritual guide, a father, a spiritual companion. He really is out there. Can I say he's enlightened? No, of course not. I can't say that. I don't think he was. He was not in the pure non-dual in the way I've seen some people or experienced some people as being. He was not in the pure non-dual.
Well, and yet, I don't know what journal it was, but he testified to having an enlightenment experience that seemed just like the ones I've read with the Zen masters. I mean, enlightenment is not necessarily a permanent structure, but he certainly tasted of that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, they call it his Fourth and Walnut experience.
The one on the street corner, yeah.
On the street corner in Louisville, Kentucky, where he just saw everyone, the essence of all humans, and he was just so overwhelmed with it. But he falls very deep after that, and then he climbs very high after that. I mean, it's never like, oh, it's all done.
Well, I think you've addressed some of this, but I think I'll ask anyway. What did he appreciate and receive from Eastern traditions? And what did he offer? And how was he viewed in the church, in the Catholic Church?
Some very interesting questions. Because about a decade ago, when they put together the new Catholic Catechism, one of the things they did was they had all these pieces about great Catholics and so on, and pieces about doctrines in Catholicism. And they didn't put Merton in the Catholic Catechism. But when Pope Francis addressed the Congress of the United States, he mentioned three people as being exemplary, and one of them was Thomas Merton. So he's much loved by people who are looking at the roots of the mystics of Christianity and spirituality. And he's maligned by those who are very rigid and find that he was really going outside the bounds, because he was from the very beginning with his relationships with V.T. Suzuki. He was painting calligraphy. He was reading the Zen masters. He was studying these methodologies. He was meeting with Hindu brahmacharyas and having correspondence with them, and Ramondo Panakar, these great Hindu Christian scholars, and so on. So he was probably the most influential voice in opening the East to the West within Catholicism and Christianity. And that was very, very, very radical at the time. So what did he get and what did he give?
Yeah. What did he appreciate about Eastern traditions, about Eastern spiritual teaching? And how did he integrate that into his own spiritual approach, his own religion? And what did he offer in return to those from those traditions?
Well, the other night at one of our gatherings, I read a quote from him in which he's commenting upon the Bhagavad Gita. And he's talking about it with just such exuberance about the dance of the great divine cosmic players. And he uses this phrase that I've used because my dear husband Jerry used to love this phrase. This is quoting Merton, talking about the divine play and the way he got this through the Bhagavad Gita and some of the Hindu scriptures. He says, the weight of the burden is the seriousness with which we take our separate and individual selves. So what did he get from the East? He tasted that. He got to begin to explore the nature of the self from the Eastern perspective. He dove very deeply in everything he did. At one point in one of his California lectures, he said, I think ultimately I'm more of a Hindu than a Catholic. And in the next breath, he might say, I'm really a Sufi, because his whole thing about the prayer of the heart, he aligned it to a Sufi mystical tradition. He was taking and feeding, and in his books, like in Seeds of Contemplation and New Seeds of Contemplation, he was making short essays that ordinary Catholic people could just open and read and get these gems or seeds of contemplation, which is why he called it that. So he was giving us, our times, our generations, our Catholic Christian tradition, he was giving us a taste of something that we had never been exposed to before. And he was giving it to us so beautifully because he was a priest. He was saying Mass every day, so he was in the church. And he was so articulate and funny, too. So he made it really palatable to people. But when you read some of his philosophical essays where he's talking to other philosophers and so on. I mean, you're like, whoa, this guy is really deep and esoteric. But for the public in his books, he was really, really down to earth.
Was the Gospel of Thomas, was he familiar with that? Did he ever write anything about it? Do you know?
It was discovered while he was alive because it was found around 1945. But there were always a lot of things that never came into his purview, although so much did. So I couldn't answer the question. So I'm going to give you a prompt, but I want to give you a little background on the prompt. So Merton was willing to take a question and to explore it. What do I really mean by grace? He would write, or what is the Holy Spirit? Do I really need to keep saying the Psalms every day if the Psalms are violent? He wasn't afraid to really get down there and explore the doctrines and the daily practice of his life. Here's a prayer that he wrote. It's quite famous. It's one that they print out on postcards and you can get it online. And it goes like this. My Lord God, I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I do believe that the desire to please you does in fact praise you. And he goes on from there. The other quote that I'm going to leave you with before we write is my favorite poet, Mary Oliver, in her poem, Summer Day. And one of the lines in that poem is, I do not know what a prayer is. And she goes on to say, but I do know how to pay attention. So because we're talking about entering portals of prayer through Thomas Merton, the prompt is what I don't know about prayer and or what I do know about prayer. I find it's actually very helpful to start with what I don't know, what I doubt, what I question, what I fear, and then see if the second part of the question actually emerges. But this much I do know, like Mary Oliver says, I don't know what a prayer is, but I do know how to pay attention. And Merton's saying, I don't know where I'm going, but I do sense that my desire to go there is praise of you. Okay, let's take 10 minutes. What I don't know about prayer, what I know about prayer. Go. Great, so let's finish up and come back together. You take a moment now to use Lectio Divina in the way of reading, to read back to yourself what you've written. Without judgment, let it sink into the body. Okay, great. Let's focus on one another now. So I know that some of you wrote the best piece that has ever been written, and some of you wrote the worst that's ever been written. But either way, since we're beyond the separate and individual self, and we don't take the weight of that burden all that seriously, we can enjoy the play of just being together with a group of friends and reading whatever we wrote in a way that might actually reveal something about our own personal process, as well as sometimes the stuff that somebody else says, they think it's so stupid, and yet it's really valuable to those who listen. If we listen. So please read in such a way, those who wish, that we can take it in. Read it like Lectio Divina, and listen for something that may be the longing of your heart.
What I don't know about prayer, that is my life. Only when I cry at your feet, when I've hit the blessing wall, the prayer wall, and I crumble in tears, for a moment, yet this moment is eternity. It is all there is. And then I stand up, for it knocks me to my knees. And the lack of interest in how I look, what I'll do today, that lingering ocean walks with me, the timeless gaze at the birds, mating 8 times together. And humor then joins, and the person across from me can ride the timeless wave, and a vote is cast, a nod toward reality, toward just what is happening in front of me, in front of us. It is a small conspiracy, us. I remember wanting, was it a prayer? To be able to stand up from my pillow and not forget, to bring you with me into the world of moving parts, if not racing minds. And to do this, to guarantee this, I must cry for the love of you.
What I don't know about prayer is if it has nothing to do with supplication or with asking for anything, even to be used to serve. As a kid, prayer was asking for help, but it was based in fear, in the hope that God would save me or at least help me in my confusion and suffering. Now, many decades later, I sometimes asked to be used, to serve fully, purely, without ego aggrandizement. But this is still about me. Sometimes I get the sense that it's possible to praise all that is, or to love that. But often that's more of an idea than my actual experience. What I do know about prayer is that there are times when I'm consumed with an intention to be what God would have for me, to be used and to serve, and be that which is possible beyond myself. That seems much closer to real prayer for me.
What I don't know about prayer, where the intentions and focus of my prayer comes from, a mysterious synchronicity of resonances arising which guide my prayers. What I don't know about prayer, if I will be able to drop into a deep state that aligns my heart-mind with my prayer. What I don't know about prayers, how it is carried from the deep intentions of my heart into the quantum field of possibilities, and how it merges in the quantum field by the deep intention of others, both embodied and disembodied. What I do know about prayer, praying for others feels good for me. I tap into the divine cosmic energy and let it flow through me. What I do know about prayer, it benefits other living things, people, animals, plants.
What I don't know about prayer is what or who I'm praying to. I don't know who or what I want to address. Do I even need to address it to anyone or anything? Not knowing this feels like a barrier, a bridge I can't cross. It frustrates me. It's about relationship with what, with who? A lack of relationship, sadly. If I think God, I'm uncomfortable. If I think universe, it's too impersonal. It feels like a void I'm speaking into, a void I can't connect with. I would like to have a relationship with it, whatever it is. I do know I have a deep relationship with life, with nature, with people, with the arts, with how things are. I feel deep gratitude, awe, and wonder towards life. I feel the sacredness of life. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the portal that prayer connects me to, helps me go through. I give thanks to life. I can speak to life because I have a relationship with it.
I couldn't think of what to say about what I didn't know about prayer. For some reason, that's not what came. What I do know about prayer is that it can happen at any moment. I know that you are more here than anything or anyone, especially myself. As soon as I remember to think of you, already prayer is. What I don't know is what will happen when I pray. I don't know how near or far I might feel from you. The only things I don't know about prayer have to do with me, have to do with my view of the world. What I do know about prayer is that any form is better than none.
What I do not know about prayer. I know not who I pray to, but in prayer I simply know that I know. I do not know the fullness of to whom I pray, but in my fullness I know my life as a prayer. In my essence, I am longing to unite with whom I do not know. But my essence knows, and knows fully, that which I know not. Therefore, it is in knowing myself as that which is free from all, that is not essence, when I will finally meet my Lord and come to see that it is his face reflected in the polish of my heart that I have longed to glimpse all along.
Thank you all so much. It was just really lovely. I'm excited now for my program. When I go to Denver, I feel like I got a little practice with you all, and it was very much fun. For those who might be interested in reading some of Merton's journals, to read all the journals like I have been doing is really a huge task. But there is a book that compiles the best selections from all of his journals. It's called The Intimate Merton. And it's readings from his journals from the earliest days right up to the present. So it's just one volume, The Intimate Merton. And it's put together by his secretary and some other people. So that's a place you might want to start just to get an overview of how he writes in his journals. I'm going to conclude with reading one of his prayers. This is our closing prayer from Thomas Merton. In the center of our being is a point of nothingness, which is untouched by any sin or any illusion. A point of pure truth. A point or spark which belongs entirely to God, which is never at our disposal, but from which God disposes of our lives. It is inaccessible to the fantasies of our own mind, even to the brutalities of our own will. This little point of nothingness and of absolute poverty is the pure glory of God in us. It is like a pure diamond blazing with the invisible light of heaven. It is in everybody. And if we could see it, we would see these billions of points of light coming together in the face and blaze of a sun that would make all the darkness and cruelty of life vanish completely. I have no program for this seeing. It is only given. But the gate of heaven is everywhere.